Hi, everybody. So I'm going to say in advance of this recording that there will be noise from downstairs from my family. Unfortunately, this is the only available time I have to record this lecture, so that's the way it's got to be. But I'm holding my mic close to me, closer to me than usual, to hopefully to cancel out the distracting background. So here we go. Tone. How you come off. That's a nice, quick definition of what we mean by tone in writing. It's how you come off. It's your apparent opinion about your audience, about your own argument, and about your subject. I'd like to start this conversation before we get to the Michael Cobb by bringing up some negative examples of tone that have just sort of appeared recently in my inbox. I bring these up not to throw shade at any particular organization, but rather to suggest that part of the reason that students presently have so much trouble striking tone is because most of our daily interactions with anyone, right, the emails we tend to receive, tend to be, if not actually sort of automatically generated by a program, then they sound like they're automatically generated by a program. Whether it's because an organization is trying to present something quote-unquote objective to us, trying to give us quote-unquote just the facts, or simply because most often they're trying to cover all the bases and make sure they don't get sued. So when you look at, say, when you buy something through Apple and you click through the terms and conditions, you look quickly at those terms and conditions, you don't actually read them, but they do affect your sense of what it is to communicate in writing. And slowly but surely, your way of communicating and writing gets infiltrated by this cold, legalistic, clinical tone, even where it's not appropriate. I want to draw attention to some tonal missteps that I've received from form letter emails, from sort of auto-generated emails, just in the last week. This is an email that I got from the Toronto District School Board. Now, we think about tone as related to audience. The audience of the emails for the Toronto District School Board right now are thousands of very frustrated and very anxious parents who are deeply concerned about the humanity of our kids' experience at school, who are afraid, right? This email begins, and I can't zoom in any further, sorry. This email begins, all elementary and secondary parents/guardians. Now, number one, you'll notice that there's a big typo there. They left off the dear. And while that's clearly an accident, that accident and its messiness is telling, and it says something about what the opinion is of the audience. Also, all elementary and secondary parents/guardians, that slash, rather than say and, suggests that we're being spoken to as though we're functions, rather than as people, which is precisely the wrong thing to do right now. The Toronto District School Board is adjusting the optional attendance process due to school closures and the heightened need to reduce potential COVID-19 exposures. As such, notice the due to and the as such. Right? This is the email list that is not about internal legal proceedings for the TDSB. This is about reaching parents and helping us make decisions. As such, the following process will be in place for the remainder of the 2020 to 2021 school year for students applying to school via optional attendance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I won't go through it. Then key dates, etc. Note, sorry for the noise in the background. Note, many families have already completed optional attendance forms and have dropped them off or mailed them to the schools that their child has applied to. Notice the typo. Notice the parenthesis. These applications are deemed valid, and received, and no further action is required. Please contact your school principal should you have any questions. Period. Thank you. Period. Do you feel the coldness of this email? I'm having trouble zooming out for some reason. There we go. Do you feel the coldness of that email? Do you feel how that email contains all of the data that I need to know? Content, it's fine, right? It's grammatically mostly fine. But various little tonal cues in it suggests to me that there's an opinion that the writer has of me as the audience or of their subject that is more concerned about litigation and protocol than it is about my kid. That's a tonal misstep. Let's look at another example from within the university. A lot of the emails you get from university tend to have, again, cold, legalistic tone, which may communicate to you that the language of education should be cold and legalistic as a default. This is the email I got asking for a volunteer note taker. Now, you know the way I do volunteer note takers in my classes is about approaching the subject with humanity. I get an email that says, this is what I get and what I try to translate into a warmer version for you. I get, Dear Professor Sergi, Matthew, There is a student in English 281 H1 SLEC and 9101 who is approved to receive volunteer note-taking as an academic accommodation. To facilitate this accommodation, we are kindly asking you, notice the addition of kindly there, it's hard to believe. We are kindly asking you to make an announcement and post the message below onto Quercus. The note-taking program operates to preserve the confidentiality of both the students accessing the notes and the students volunteering as note-takers. We recognize that you may be able to identify a student in certain situations where you have received only one letter of accommodation from a student with a peer note-taking accommodation. We request that you please do not share this student's information. Please consider when possible providing, right, and this is all good, like this, the message is important, right? Jumping down to the bottom, you may receive follow-up emails from accessibility services regarding a need for additional note-takers as students register for the accommodation. Please note, our current system sends emails each time a student registers, so we apologize in advance if multiple messages are sent to you. Thank you for all your support and understanding. I haven't given you... If you have any questions concerning the volunteer note-taking, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can be reached by phone, etc., right? If you feel the tone of this, right, the message is great. I think the volunteer note-taking program is awesome. But the way that we are approached by it suggests that our humanity is not being taken into account. That's a matter of tone, right? The way the email comes off, it communicates to a student asking, say, for this accommodation, that they are more important as a function, an automatable function, than they are as a human. So I try to counteract that when I make the announcements about note-taking in my classes. That is a matter of tone. In both of those cases, we have educational entities that are contacting us in ways that we would want to be treated most like human beings, but that are treating us through tone as though we are computer functions. This tends to fall into student writing a lot, and it often creates a tonal misstep. Again, I have nothing but love for accessibility services and for the TDSB. Mostly nothing but love for the TDSB right now. But I gotta say, these ways of communicating suggest something other than the humanness that we require from education, and particularly in the humanities. I hope you can see that I'm separating out again here content from tone. Remember, tone is not what you say, but how you come off when you say it. Simply beginning an email, all caretakers and parents / guardians, comma, or, right, what is it? Dear Professor Sergi, comma, Matthew, colon, right? Those things say something about what you think of me. And yes, they're both probably mistakes, but the mistakes you make are telling in terms of tone, hence the need for proofreading. So let's get to Cobb, right? We're going to look at 3 pieces by Cobb today, right? And it's important to understand the audience when we're talking about tone, right? So let's talk about the audience for each of them. We have an excerpt from Single Arguments for the Uncoupled that you're about to read, which is an academic book for NYU Press's Sexual Culture series. It's very respectable, but it allows some room for informality, inviting books that, they say, creatively recast the juncture of aesthetics and politics, both in form and content, and including semi-autobiographical and reflective writing alongside rigorously theorized work. Then there's a little like reading, or a little like reading, preference, Facebook, and overwhelmed interpretations. That's in PMLA. PMLA is one of the flagship journals for professional humanities scholars worldwide. It is the highest level you can get. It's very competitive to get into, and it's recognized for its theoretical sophistication. And then you'll have the Supreme Court's Lonely Hearts Club, which was a New York Times op-ed written by Cobb on June 30th, 2015, just after the legalization of gay marriage in the U.S. It is one of the most respected newspapers in the world, as I'm sure you know, but it has a very broad readership across various levels of education. So, I'll start with an excerpt, and a long one. This is going to be in a few pieces, from Cobb's academic book, Single Arguments for the Uncoupled. Remember, this is a book series that allows for more experimentation than most. But the audience for an academic book is still academics. That's professional scholars who are often unforgivingly rigorous, sometimes stuffy, and sometimes polemic in our activisms, and utterly relentless in our attention to detail, right? However, we are also an audience that is less suspicious than, say, an audience of graduate students and intelligent bloggers, right? The one you're writing to in your undergraduate writing. If someone is already speaking to us as a professor, then they've earned a sort of automatic level of trust that what they have to say has a level of authority, which means we're more patient with them when they deviate from, say, a more decisive tone or a more professional tone. Right? So, though Cobb in this case remains professional, we have a little more leeway in this situation than you would have tonally in your undergraduate essay. So here's what Cobb gives us. Oh, and as I read, think about formality, authority, and warmth as I read. And if you're unfamiliar with the Beyoncé song, Single Ladies Put a Ring on It, and the famous music video that accompanied the release of that song, please pause here and go watch the video for Single Ladies Put a Ring on It. Just Google Beyoncé Single Ladies. I'll move forward with this reading. It's a long reading again, assuming you know the video and song. Here we go. We'll start at the beginning, the top. But don't just take my or DePaulo's word for it, especially since sadly I'm not always single. At least in the West, we almost always slight the experience of those who remain uncoupled. Proof is everywhere, especially at the highest and most far-reaching levels of popular culture. In the fall and winter of 2008, for example, you could hear and watch in almost every place pop superstar Beyoncé Knowles' hit song, Single Ladies Put a Ring on It, made viral on YouTube in a video featuring an engaging and athletic dance routine with Knowles and two female backup dancers. The clip is an updated and radically altered version of Gwen Verdon's Mexican Breakfast, choreographed by Bob Fosse in the 60s. The homemade digital parodies of the video from all over the globe, always a YouTube staple, proliferated at lightning speed. The dance was too good not to both learn and digitally record, especially with friends. Rap star Kanye West at the 2009 MTV Video Music Awards famously interrupted the singer Taylor Swift's Best Female Video Award acceptance speech to say that Beyoncé's video was more deserving. It was, according to West, one of the best videos of all time. Fox's Glee, a campy television hit about a school show choir, devoted an entire episode to recreating the video's dance moves, even going so far as to have an entire high school football team perform the routine on the field. Note so far here, right? This is business casual and formality. This is warm, friendly. And this is pretty decisive in its tone, right? It's talking about something unusually pop culture oriented, but it is pretty straightforward, though very friendly. There's a tonal shift here. The song, after 7 calls to all the single ladies, offers a story with a fiercely worded message. A previous lover from 3 years ago is jealous that the singer of the song is, quote, doing her own thing. I think it's her own little thing, actually. He has no right to be jealous, Beyoncé's voice assures us, quote, because if you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it. If you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it. Don't be mad once you see that he won it. If you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it. End quote. The it, one presumes, is the singer, who is the thing to be ringed. The implication of the ring is that the ex-lover should have married, or at least gotten engaged to, the singer. You'll notice that the tone here becomes just a bit more professional and more decisive here, stays warm. But here, now that we're quoting the somewhat silly lyrics of Beyoncé's Single Ladies Put a Ring on It, Cobb has changed the way he comes off a little bit. He has made clear, I am close reading and I'm serious about this. Do you see why? Okay, moving on to the next quote. And here's also an image of the video. So that's the video. So the story of Single Ladies Put a Ring on It is not really the story about single life. It's about a missed opportunity to be coupled in a sustained way, which sadly might be all we ever really hear about being single. It's not even about glorifying the fun of being a single lady, because all there is to say to all the single ladies, and by proxy the single men who are wondering if they should pop the question, is that something grave happens if you don't make couplehood stable and permanent. One day you might have to see the one who got away from you with someone else. Moreover, Beyoncé is not satisfied with describing jealousy she might provoke, or announcing the man's loss of the right to possess her, it. There is a significant shift of tone during the bridge of the song, and we're treated to an even more confusing message. Confusing because there might still be a chance for this reluctant-to-get-engaged ex. Quote, don't treat me to the things of this world. I'm not that kind of girl. Your love is what I prefer, what I deserve, is a man that makes me, then takes me, and delivers me to a destiny, to infinity and beyond. Pull me into your arms, say I'm the one you want, you own. If you don't, you'll be alone. And like a ghost, I'll be gone. Notice again, we've had a tonal shift that makes it even more serious without being while retaining the warmth, right? We've gotten a little less warm, we've gotten a little less friendly, a little more argumentative in tone. We've retained our business casual professionalness, and we have become more decisive in our close reading. Not only does this single lady not want to be single, She doesn't even want to be with, as she puts it, the man on my hips. She wants her ex to acknowledge his desire for her. Otherwise, she threatens he'll be all alone and she will be like a ghost to him, tormenting him with his now tragic status. Notice how Cobb is aware of the tonal shift in the song. Here's where Beyoncé's song is making more than a claim for the necessity of participating in the normative recognition of couples in the form of marriage. She's not arguing for the relative value of marriage. That's a value she's taking as a given. Remember comments about given premises of an argument. Marriage is never a real controversy, and she's not immediately concerned with the failure to reach that preferred kind of social status with all its rights and privileges. Instead, she's putting the emphasis on how tragic it would be to remain single. It will get spooky if you don't keep engaging, literally, the couple. And instead of having the it girl, Beyoncé, you will have only loss. Her song helps train us to want the thing that hasn't worked before, the broken couple, rather than the terrible status of the haunted and most likely lonely single. The song is very typical in its approach to all the single ladies. It chooses to highlight loneliness as a dimension of singleness that can and must be overcome by no longer being single. That's all we'll learn here. There's nothing more to see in the lives of the singles who dance all over the place. All right, so is Cobb underdressed in that quote? Let's actually not go. Is Cobb underdressed in this quote? Not at all. This is business casual writing, well put together, but hardly stuffy in its style. It is decisive in its argumentation, but it becomes more so, right? We get that introduction via glee, etc., and then suddenly the tone shifts, the wording shifts, and it is deeply attentive in its close reading, which is an interesting contrast when the text being close read is so informal itself in tone. That is the Beyoncé. And above all, it is warm. I think this remains warm. It feels like Cobb is present in the room with us, as he will be present in the room with us, or at least in the virtual room, soon. Good writing can occur anywhere on the various tonal spectra that I discussed in my tone lecture. An excellent social media post is generally casual, not formal, not business casual, right? Casual or informal. It's usually tentative and it's usually intimate, right? That's an excellent social media post. An excellent legal brief will be very formal, very decisive, and thoroughly legalistic and somewhat cold in its tone. Excellent advertisement writing, that's casual, decisive, and friendly, but it's not intimate. Figuring out how to manipulate these variables of tone, and again, I've only presented you with the variables of formality, of authority, and of warmth as three variables among countless in tone. The Abrams and Richards quote that I've read last time gives you some of the sense of how much it can vary, right? But figuring out how to manipulate these various variables of tone, of how we come off, is a lifelong practice, for which the best method is reading a lot and reading well, and for which the next best method is experimentation in writing with ongoing feedback, which is what we're here to give you over time. Again, how authoritative you sound will depend on the point you are making in any given sentence. And you should get it as authoritative as you can get it without lying or faking in each case. Make strong claims and support them decisively. The warmth in academic writing, again, should give the sense that you're in the room with us but not friends with us, right? The formality should be business casual. That's a pretty good description of what we just read from the Beyoncé passage. Now, the three Cobb readings you are about to do vary somewhat widely in their formality and their authority, right? But not in their warmth. That's what I want you to pay attention to. We always get the sense in our readings that Cobb is in the room with us, that he is present here. If we look at the New York Times editorial, the Supreme Court's Lonely Hearts Club, it is written for a broad public audience of thousands, millions, in a respected but not academic publication. This tone varies from warm to positively hot. It is a polemic, rightfully and righteously emotional in places, and thus rhetorically strong and blunt, well tuned to the audience of that piece. Remember, extremely importantly, you can maintain warmth even as the level of formality and authority vary, right? Now all of us single people are pathetic, not just the straight ones. As I read that bit alone in my apartment, I choked on my coffee. Isn't it enough to be denied the constellation of benefits, etc., right? As I read on, I started to wonder, notice the anecdotal quality. He's walking us through, right? I think the New York Times editorial you'll find to be the least formal of the three. If you disagree, I suspect we should clarify in our discussions what we mean by formal and informal here. As anecdotal and personal as the other pieces are, right, as both the other readings you'll do, they never mention Cobb spitting out his coffee in the first paragraph, right? You'll see the book Single deals with Cobb's grandmother right at the top in a really intimate way. But you'll notice how much different, how raw the tone in the New York Times version is, how much rawer it is. It's almost off the cuff. But here too is where we discover that tone is not necessarily a stable variable throughout a piece. In the hands of the masters, and Cobb is a master, I'm nowhere near his level of mastery. I'm going to close by reading from the bottom of page 202 in a little like reading. In a real way, I think, the likable Facebook object is an object that has been taken out of context, forced into our feeds. And more often than not, we attach the likable object to the Facebook subject who brought them to our attention. Jordan Stein is a vegan. This is very big. He takes photographs. Theodor Adorno, when defending his complicated use of aphorisms, and then we go on here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Sorry, there was a technical issue there. I'm not sure where we left off. But anyway, so we'll see here. He's quoting the Sontag here. Susan Sontag, in her excellent essay on Elias Canetti, gives us uncanny insight into the ephemeral quality of a Facebook feed she would never know. She was interested, right, so that also feels more human, right? He's discussing Sontag, but also bringing in the fact that she preceded Facebook. She was interested in Canetti's notebooks, and I wonder what happens if we think about Facebook as a kind of notebook, apparently an ephemeral one, although we must know that nothing on Facebook is lost ever. Here's what Sontag thinks. He gives the big quote. Your Facebook profile as notebook. The analogy is not entirely apt. Pay real attention to his tone here. Watch as it shifts. The analogy is not entirely apt, especially if we dwell with the unsociable qualities Sontag assigns to the aphorist. But stay with us. Comparisons are never easy or identical. Like, as we know, is never the same. The self-construction of the intensely impudent, the very full of oneself, doesn't sound too far from the curated selves we manufacture for our lists of Facebook friends, who help us become more self-involved for worldly consumption. It's not clear if we're really being more sociable on social networking sites, or just more impudent. But here's the point I want more at hand. The distinction of ideas, the brevity of their expressions, and the lack of deep elaboration or helpful illustration combine to make thinking light, make thinking like. Right? So, and actually I'm gonna skip this last. Oh no, I'm not. Here we go. So to close, right? Did you perceive the sharp shifts, right, as Adorno was introduced, as opposed to when Sontag is introduced in the paragraph following, right? Notice you'll see Sontag is doubly humanized and doubly praised as opposed to Adorno, and the attendant shift in warmth and formality follows that. There are a number of other markers across Cobb's work that establish relative tones of formality, right? Notice in a little like reading, for instance, there are markers of extreme formality right from the outset. This is in one of the most, as we said, one of the most professional publications, most prestigious and widely known academic journals in the world. And this article falls under The Changing Profession. Its full title is A Little Like Reading, Preference, Facebook, and Overwhelmed Interpretations. That's an eminently professional in tone title in an eminently professional, sort of almost too tightly so, a journal and a section of that journal, right? So we open that section, this is his opening, by saying, Herman Melville, Anne Carson, and Emily Dickinson, sentence fragment. These authors' bits of language just claimed me as I stared at some books on my office shelf, and I'm not sure exactly what to make of these passages except that I like them, so I'm listing them for you. You might also like them. I like many things, and in no particular order. For instance, here's what I liked one day not long ago on Facebook, and he goes through the list, right? And then there's a sudden shift when Adorno comes in, and then back. There's something jarringly but intriguingly jagged here in the proximity of unlike tones, of a sort of disarray of different tonal shifts in this PMLA piece by Cobb. And you'll notice that that mimics the tone of a Facebook feed. See, here's the thing about tone. To return to our well-worn clothing metaphor, the venue matters. And the best-dressed person at that venue thoroughly knows who they are as a function of where they are. To get published in PMLA is for scholars like going to the Met Gala. And here, Cobb walks in the door like Lady Gaga, as he should. He is at once formal and playful. without losing any of his style. It's not quite a meat dress, I realize. But Cobb is walking in right, fully formal and fully playful. He has style and formality. This class can't train you to dress like Lady Gaga or write like Cobb, and to try to do so now would be premature. Remember, the first step for undergraduate writers is finding the right fit, the thing that fits you best, the right cut. And that's where we start. Here, the important thing is to train you to write in a truly plain, direct, and straightforward style, a business casual, present, decisive tone. That's what the university undergraduate essay is for, to give you the fundamentals and to test whether you retain them. The way to get to the Met Gala, as to Carnegie Hall, as to PMLA, is not to burst in suddenly as though you own the place. It's practice, practice, practice. Tonal missteps tend to happen when writers are not paying attention, or more often are straining for a tone that doesn't really fit them or fit them yet, right? If it doesn't fit their voice or their taste or their skill level, if it doesn't fit their situation. In undergrad papers, the tonal missteps tend to be using buzzwords and jargon, not because they mean something, but because they dress it up. Right? Formulaic writing, we've already discussed this. Cleverness flourishes cuteness, and most often proofreading errors and sloppiness. These things make it seem like you're wearing something that doesn't fit. But what's most striking about this text as well is not only that he's wearing it so well, but in a little like reading, you'll find that its tone is tentative. Right? Here the idea of authority in tone comes into play. Cobb is talking about something so nuanced that it requires him to be sometimes tentative in tone and sometimes decisive. It is testing the waters of its ideas. And that's probably the most advanced thing that a writer like Cobb can do, is move from authoritative decisiveness to tentativeness. So tone is a complicated thing. It's a nuanced thing. But I hope that these 3 readings in Cobb, if you read them with attention to tone, will shed some light on the variables that you have access to and that practice will make accessible. Thanks.